Welcome back. We're talking with David Valadao, Kristen Olson, and Linda Halderman about state politics generally and this year's state budget in particular. Perhaps the biggest change Governor Brown is proposing, some would say it's historic, is his plan to restructure the state-local relationship by shifting funding and responsibility for certain services to local governments. So, what services is he talking about?
Well, there are a number of services involved with the realignment proposal, and in concept, I like the idea of cutting the strings in Sacramento and moving those services locally where they're closer to the people. Local governments can usually run programs more cost-effectively and efficiently.
And the polling shows that.
And the polling absolutely shows that. The concern is that the funding needs to go along with the programs, and then the flexibility needs to be given. Right now, it seems that there's just going to be another flood of mandates given to local government, and no long-term plan for funding those mandates, and that puts local governments in a very precarious position.
Right. There is an idea, though, that if the tax increase was passed, that money for 5 years would go toward this realignment. The question is, what happens after 5 years, right?
Exactly. For the first 5 years, the funding is theoretically guaranteed if the tax extensions pass, which I think is a very big assumption. But after the 5 years, there's no plan for funding those programs, and that's a huge concern, especially for cities and counties who have already cut millions of dollars out of their budgets.
I want to get your impressions on this, Dave. Do you think it's a good idea, this realignment?
No, I actually spent the morning at my local county jail touring it and talking to my sheriff about how it's going to affect him, and there's just no room. They're releasing criminals with 30 days of their sentences served, and they've got no room, they've got no way to handle basically what the governor wants to send their direction just in their department alone, and then to worry about being funded later on once the tax increases are gone. It doesn't actually solve any of the long-term problems, and that's what we're here for.
Now this, though, is $5.9 billion supposed savings to the state if we do this realignment. Again, just like redevelopment agencies, if you say no, we can't change redevelopment agencies, that's $1.7 billion. No, we can't change restructuring of state government, $5.9 billion. That money's got to come someplace else. And the question then becomes, where does that money come from?
Well, we've been rushed to this process. We were basically given 60 days. We were no time to look at it and actually research and make sure that we can actually solve these problems. And it was thrown out to us. We went through committee hearings. And
all right, let me ask you this. Are you philosophically opposed to realignment, or practically, once you see it on the ground, opposed to realignment?
Just knowing what's going on and how it's being thrown at the locals, no, I'm not a fan of the way it's being done. Philosophically, yeah, I'll support it as long as the locals get to make the decisions on how it's run, but when you've got the mandates in place, the way that they've got to take care of whatever issue it is, I mean, Title 24, the way they take care of their inmates, they can't find any good cost savings as long as we've got the state mandates, and then we've got to rely on the tax increase for the next 5 years to pay for it. It's not a good long-term solution. We've got to find places to save money, and there are areas out there that we can. We're just not given those opportunities.
Linda, what are your thoughts on this?
I'm very concerned that we have yet to see a detailed proposal of what is exactly meant by realignment. So without the details, I feel like I'm being asked to evaluate a skeleton, and to me, promises made to the Valley are often promises not kept. My concern is that the savings will come at the cost of the locals.
So did you also, I assume, have a concern about this, even if the tax increase was extended for 5 years, the funding after that? Is there a concern that that funding would continue if the realignment did occur?
There is, at this point, no way to know that. And to take that kind of risk and put it on the backs of cities and counties that are already struggling, I don't think is the right approach in this economy.
Well, let's talk philosophically about realignment. Assuming, in a perfect world, the money's there, local control, I would assume, is something you support?
It is something I support. And one of the reasons is that nobody knows better what we need in our valley than those of us who live here. It shouldn't be a Sacramento decision. Our schools should be able to decide on their own what our kids need to do and how we spend our money.
In terms of requirements, is there a concern there that maybe the state will transfer these responsibilities to the locals and then may or may not provide the money and then may or may not make additional requirements on the locals? Is that the concern?
Having seen a number of pieces of legislation already so far introduced in the legislature, that is guaranteed to happen. Unfunded mandates appear to be a favorite pastime in Sacramento.
Is that also a concern that you share?
Yes, and there's no reason, philosophically, I mean, if you've got a school board, you've got parents walking in and talking to the school board and actually part of the process, not enough people go up to Sacramento and talk to us about what's going on in their communities. It's a lot closer to them. It's where they can actually have a voice and they can be seen, and the people that live there are making those decisions on a day-to-day basis.
You know, I'm just curious, the California State Association of Counties seems to support realignment. Does that factor into your decision at all?
CSAC is much where I am on this one, is that, as you said, philosophically in concept, it can make a lot of sense, but the devils are in the details. And so one of the things I've said to Governor Brown as he's visited our caucus is we think it's great that we want to realign programs to local communities where, as we've all said, they know how to better deliver the services to the demographics of their regions. The challenge is the $5.9 billion, I believe you suggested, that they document as savings. Well, that really isn't documented, because the only way we're going to save money is if at the same time we eliminate the state bureaucracies that used to operate the program. And so far there's been intention conversation from the governor that that's his hope to do that, but there's been no real clear plan for doing that, and unless that's done, there's no savings at the end of the day.
Okay, well, when we come back, we'll talk about the dreaded T word, taxes. Will taxes have to be part of any state budget fix? That conversation when we return. This is the Maddy Report.